Okay, but if you would say that this life force is good, then how do we explain wars and things like that?
Wars are perpetuated by people who don't share this understanding. It's very simple. Wars are created by, I say they're created by people, but let's say they're created through people. But
by the life force?
By the same life force that creates everything else. They're created and perpetuated by thoughts and feelings that revolve around being a separate self. All the activities that we know of as war are dominated or come from one single thought. I am a separate self. That's it. That is the origin of all war and conflict. Conflict in ourselves, conflict in relationships between two people, conflict in families, conflict in communities, conflict in countries, conflict in the world. It all comes from one simple idea. I am a separate self. And until the problem of conflict and war is dealt with at that level, in other words, at its core, its root issue, the conflict will continue. I mean, for how many centuries have we been trying to prevent wars from happening? Even now, with all our sophisticated means, how come, with the web and everything, how come we can't prevent wars? We can't. Why? Because we never go to their cause. So when you want to, if a car, you're driving along in a car and it comes to a halt, what do? You look at the petrol gauge. Oh, it's run out of petrol. That's why it's come to a halt. It's kind of obvious. You go to the cause. But strangely, we don't do it in relation to conflicts, personal conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, intercommunity conflicts, and international conflicts. But they all come from the same place, just this simple, single belief.
But then it would seem that this thought is stronger even than the life force wanting to do good for itself.
Well, it would seem that, but it's not, in fact, because if you think of what is the dominant motivating force that is present in one who believes themselves to be a separate self, what is the one idea that dominates a person that has fallen under the spell of the separate self?
Fear?
No, the search for happiness. Even stronger than our fear is our desire for love and happiness. Even the people that are perpetrating these wars do so because ultimately what they want from them is to be happy. Ellen and I watched an extraordinary film a few days ago called Downfall about Hitler's last days. And it was so obvious. He wanted to be happy. He was doing what he thought was necessary for himself and his people to be happy. So even when we have fallen profoundly under the spell of ignorance, the one thing that motivates us is happiness. And what is happiness? The absence of ignorance. That is what everybody truly desires, to be free of ignorance. In other words, to know themselves as they truly are. And that's what happiness is, the knowing of our own being. Now, how each of us goes about securing happiness and love in our lives varies. It is most of us seek happiness through acquiring objects, substances, and relationships. And some take that to a great extreme, and hence the wars that we're referring to. But they're all these activities are undertaken in order to find one thing, happiness. And our culture has persuaded us to believe that happiness is dependent upon the acquisition of an object, that love is dependent upon the acquisition of a relationship, that peace is dependent upon the acquisition of a particular circumstance. And all the time, this that we long for, love, peace and happiness, is just lying in our hearts all the time, just there, present at the heart of all experience, available for recognition whenever it is turned towards.
That's very comforting to hear.
It's too bad when David Cameron initiated his inquiry last year into the nature of well-being, what it is, how you can measure happiness. Do you remember last year he did something like that? How can we measure happiness? How do we judge happiness? And it was pitiful to hear the criteria by which we measure happiness in our culture. I mean, it was pitiful. I mean, to say it was primitive would be an insult to the primitives. It was so childish. It was so simplistic.
What was it?
Oh, how much money you have, and how many kids you have, and how secure your job is, and all these things. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that it's not natural to look after your family and to earn a decent living. I'm not saying for a minute not to do those things, but to measure happiness.
Maybe it was.
Can you take that?
I can't believe I'm going to say what I'm going to say. But maybe it was a step in the right direction, in the sense that